All right, let's jump right in. Today, we're actually going to travel back in time to explore what was really the first great global network. And forget fiber optics, we are talking about a connection that was forged by footsteps, by camels, and, believe it or not, by a single shimmering thread. It's a pretty wild question when you think about it, right? But the story of the Silk Road, well, it's really the story of how one luxury item, silk, became so incredibly desirable that it sparked this total revolution in trade and communication. It was the first time in history that opposite ends of the known world were truly linked. And, that's not just a clever line, it's the truth. You should really think of it as the world's original information superhighway. It was this massive, sprawling network that didn't just move stuff. It moved ideas, it moved cultures, and it moved technologies across entire continents. Okay, so let's get our bearings here. What exactly was this network? And what parts of the ancient world are we even talking about? So first thing you gotta know, the name Silk Road is a little bit misleading. It wasn't one single paved highway like we'd imagine today. Nope. It was a super complex web of shifting trails, desert tracks, and treacherous mountain passes. A true network connecting completely different civilizations. And the sheer scale of this is just mind-boggling. This network wasn't some quick historical blip. It got its start around 130 BCE during China's Han Dynasty, and it thrived for more than 1,000 years. Just try to imagine that. That's like a single system lasting all the way from the height of the Roman Empire to the dawn of the Renaissance. That was the Silk Road. So you have to ask, what kind of treasures could possibly fuel such an incredible, long-lasting enterprise? What were people willing to haul across thousands of dangerous, back-breaking miles? Because let's be crystal clear about this. This journey was a life-threatening gamble. To get someone to willingly face down scorching deserts and freezing mountains, the payoff had to be absolutely immense. So what on earth could have been worth that kind of risk? Well, it was a two-way street. From the east, you had these world-changing innovations like paper, delicate porcelain, and of course, its most famous export, silk. And in return, the caravans heading back east were loaded down with Western gold and silver, fragrant spices, and powerful horses that the Chinese armies desperately wanted. So why call it the Silk Road? Well, because silk was basically the perfect thing to trade. It was incredibly lightweight, which meant you could pack a literal fortune's worth onto a camel without weighing it down. For the Romans, it was this mysterious, almost magical fabric, and they were willing to pay just astronomical prices for it. But actually getting that silk to Rome? Wow, that was an epic challenge. Travelers had to deal with the punishing Taklamakan Desert, the soaring Pamir Mountains, a place they literally called the roof of the world, and that's not even mentioning the constant threat of bandits just waiting to ambush them. So how did they do it? How did they survive? Well, they adapted. Merchants figured out there was safety in numbers, so they banded together in these huge groups called caravans. And their secret weapon? The camel. That animal was perfectly engineered to carry heavy loads across harsh, dry landscapes with very little water. They were, for all intents and purposes, the long-haul trucks of the ancient world. And this brings us to what might be the most important part of the entire story. Because you see, the most valuable things carried along these routes were completely invisible. So was this whole epic, 1,000-year-long project really just about trading some shiny fabric for some shiny metal? Or was there something much, much bigger happening just below the surface? This right here, this is the real legacy of the Silk Road. See, traveling alongside those merchants were monks, missionaries, and scholars. Buddhism traveled all the way from India and completely transformed China. Chinese technology, like the revolutionary invention of papermaking, spread west. And just think about that for a second. That single innovation would eventually make knowledge way more accessible and help fuel the European Renaissance. That was the real treasure being exchanged. But, of course, all good things must come to an end. So if this network was so vital, why isn't it still around? Let's take a look at how this ancient network finally faded away and what it left in its wake. So what happened? Well, it was really a perfect storm of factors. First, sailors got really, really good at navigating the seas, which turned out to be a faster and cheaper way to move lots of stuff. At the same time, the big empires that used to protect these land routes started to crumble, which made traveling overland way more dangerous. And finally, the very same routes that carried culture and ideas also carried disease, and devastating pandemics disrupted the trade that the whole system relied on. So here's the real takeaway. While the camel caravans did eventually stop, the connections they built, they never really went away. The Silk Road taught the world that it was, in fact, one interconnected world. It was the very first draft of the globalized society that we all live in today. And it really makes you wonder, doesn't it? What invisible ideas are we exchanging on our modern networks right now?